Hello indie game fans, the busy month of December meant that these hidden gems have slipped through the cracks, so let's begin with Koumajou Remilia 2 Stranger's Requiem, the remaster of a game from 2010, which is a classic Vania-style action platformer that uses characters from the Toho project, in which you play as the knife throwing maid Sakuya as she once again battles various bosses. It is not a Metroidvania and is linear in structure, but the bullet hell boss fights are a challenge and a delight, and follows a trend of more Toho games releasing on Steam. I've enjoyed this Korean developer's work since 3000th Duo from 2019, so I was pleasantly surprised to discover the release of HunterX codename T when looking at new releases, and I'm happy to report that it does not disappoint. This, like the original game HunterX, are more Symphony of the Night style Metroidvania titles with XP, leveling and RPG aspects, in which you can grind to become overpowered if you want to, with it having some interesting enemy designs and good combat, although the story isn't the strongest. Still, for a fun Metroidvania romp, do check out this game. This video is brought to you by Heroes of Eternal Quest, a roguelite strategy title in which the world has been destroyed, but reconfigured itself into a massive pyramid known as the Tower of Shards. Humanity has found themselves on the lowest, poorest area of the world and hope to ascend the tower, in which special heroes known as the Marked have the ability to travel through portals and into the upper levels, gathering and bringing back resources to upgrade their home so that they can get stronger for the next expedition. How it plays out is that the character moves around the path of a level in a loop, battling enemies in real time, but you're able to place buildings to help, as well as a variety of equipment and items. It is a very systems-heavy title with plenty of RPG elements, so if interested, the game is available right now, so get it on Steam via the link in the description below, and don't miss out on the 10% launch discount. Here's an interesting title that you might have missed, since A Highland Song is from developer Inko, best known for 80 Days and Heaven's Vault, but rather than being more of an adventure game like their other titles, this is instead more of a platformer with a rhythm and musical element to it. You play as a young girl who is running on foot to a lighthouse, traversing the Scottish Highlands as she goes on an adventure. Interestingly, there is focus on exploration since there are multiple paths that you can take forward, but most are hidden, so you do have to poke and prod at the game, but perhaps questionably, it is paired with a timer mechanic since you only have a limited number of days to get to the lighthouse, which comes into conflict with the exploration part, with the game instead wanting you to play through multiple times. However, it is a beautifully constructed game that is filled with lore and Scottish flavour, so for that alone, it gets a recommendation.
父さんと母さんに連れられてじいちゃんの弔問に来て以来だな。あれから10年以上経つのか。
I'm not usually a horror game person, so you understand why I didn't cover this at launch, since Hollow Cocoon is a first-person horror title set in 1980s Japan. First-person indie horror games have a large miss-to-hit ratio, so being relatively unfamiliar, I couldn't tell if it would be any good, so thanks to the Steam community for sharing their thoughts. You play as a university student who returns to his mother's hometown deep in the mountains in order to see his maternal grandmother, who is critically ill, but of course there are dark secrets to uncover, even having a monster that's chasing you down that you need to hide from, having a little bit of an alien isolation feel to the game, and looks like a must-play for horror game fans.
たとえ繭を出られても、もう口はないし、飛ぶこともできない。卵を産んで死んでしまうの。人がそういう虫にしてしまったの。
私は蝶じゃない。私はまるでお蚕のよう。でも私はそれで幸せだった。
Want to see something weird? Crossroad OS has you meddling around with a haunted operating system in a horror adventure game kind of way that mostly involves point and click using the mouse, in which you are digging into the OS to see what's there. It's short and sweet and has vibes similar to Pony Island or Inscription, being a little bit spooky but is not a straight up horror game and has clever ideas. A fantastic adventure game is While the Iron's Hot, one in which you play as a blacksmith and have to forge various items and equipment in order to help the locals. You can go out and explore the world and even mine for resources, but it is all centered around the forge and anvil. Key items that you craft can be used to resolve puzzles and to advance the story, and notably does not have combat here, being more of a straight adventure game, with the pixel art and narrative being enough to keep you playing. I've mentioned this title a number of times since it is somewhat of a miracle that Faeland even got to an early access release, since it was kickstarted back in 2019 and then the developers kind of went radio silent to its own detriment since there wasn't much hype around its release. So indie developers do take note, you cannot just kickstart your game and don't give any updates. It's a shame since, by all accounts, this Zelda 2-like adventure platformer is fantastic, with the early access release having a decent chunk of content that is averaging 5 to 6 hours so far, about a stereotypical blank slate type of character finding his way in the world with interesting combat and platforming, since you do dodge by backflipping for example. And while it hasn't sold gangbusters, I hope that there's a happy ending to the development of this game. Here's a surprise release that dropped out of nowhere as well, since Snacko did surprise release during the Wholesome Snack presentation, which isn't a strategy that I would advocate for indie developers since you need time to properly prepare for launch. Still, it's an adorable farm simulation RPG in which you play as a city cat who moves away from the city to a small town, having to help rebuild it from scratch, farming and getting to know the locals along the way. It has that interesting visual style of 2D pixel art sprites for the characters with 3D environmental objects and looks nice, but seems to be a rather by the numbers one of these. But if you love cats and want an adorable game, this is one to pick up. Here is one of the most ambitious games that is going under the radar in Sparrock's Dream, an open-world action RPG set in a world of gods, which, when defeated, you can take control of another character in this dynamic living world. People have compared this to Skyrim meets Diablo, in which you're completely free to explore the world and has systems and characters that will react to your actions. It even has additional systems like player housing, so it's that kind of expensive RPG, with some Steam reviews having 20 to 40 hours of playtime, with the interesting part being that this is not an early access game and is fully fleshed out and is the definition of a hidden gem. Here's a neat roguelike platformer that you might have missed as well, in which the sci-fi setting and multiple parallel dimensions of Trinity fusion does give it an interesting twist. You play as the same character but in different parallel universes, each having their own special abilities and facing off against a set of enemies unique to their dimension, in which it features all the must-haves for a roguelite and is pretty good, with the 1.0 release being a great time to check it out. If you love roguelites, then you have to watch this video to find out about 50 upcoming titles of 2024.